The story you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts featuring historical characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. Antone Charles Costa was born in 1945, and while he was still just an infant, his father was killed in World War II. His mother later remarried, and when Costa was 7 years old, he informed his mother that a man was coming into his bedroom at night. On questioning, he identified his stepfather as the man responsible. In November 1961, when he was 16, Costa entered an apartment in Massachusetts and was leaning over a teenage girl asleep in bed when she suddenly awoke and screamed. Costa took off from the scene, but it wasn't the last time this girl would see him. Just 3 days later, he went back to the house and tried dragging her down the stairs but was stopped by the neighbors. He was convicted of assault and burglary on January 4, 1962 and was given a 1-year suspended sentence along with 3 years of probation. In 1963, Costa married and the relationship produced 3 children. However, his drug use at the time led to him displaying irresponsible and bizarre behavior, and this put a large strain on the marriage. Costa brought 2 girls, Diane Federo and Bonnie Williams, back to the house in June 1966 and explained that he was going to drive them to Pennsylvania and then he would carry on alone to California. Later, he claimed he had taken the girls to Hayward, California, but they were never found. Costa surfaced at his home in Massachusetts 10 days later, and the girls are now believed to be his first known victims. Costa and a female acquaintance were hiking in the Truro woods in August 1967 when an incident occurred. Costa shot his friend with an arrow and later claimed it was an accident and apologized. In the beginning of 1968, Costa's marriage was a mess, and in late January, he moved to the Hyde-Ashbury district in San Francisco. Girlfriend Barbara Spaulding left her child with relatives and vanished on the day that Costa left for Massachusetts. She was never seen again, and homicide detectives now believe that Costa murdered her as well. Back home in Massachusetts, Costa burglarized a doctor's office on May 17, stealing various surgical instruments and drugs valued at $5,000. A week later, 18-year-old Cindy Monzon vanished from her home in Provincetown. Her disappearance was reported to police on June 14. Costa shot her, then removed her heart from her body. The autopsy revealed signs that Monzon had been sexually abused after she was dead. By August, Costa was divorced. His brand new live-in lover, Susan Perry, lasted for a week before she disappeared, September 10. When questioned, Costa told his friends that she had, quote-unquote, gone to Mexico. In mid-September, Costa was arrested for driving with a suspended driver's license. Later on, the 25th, he was picked up for failure to support his wife and children. He was held in custody until November 8. Upon release, he started spending time and sharing drugs with Christine Gallant, another habit of the hip scene. On the weekend of November 23, Gallant was found dead in her New York apartment, drowned in the bathtub after a barbiturate overdose. On January 24, 1969, Patricia Walsh and Mary Ann Wysocki disappeared on a visit to Provincetown. Patricia and Mary had both been killed by gunshots and their hearts had been removed from their bodies. The autopsy of each woman also showed signs of post-mortem sexual abuse. Their bodies were found together along with the body of Cindy Monzon. 2 weeks later, searchers found a woman's mutilated body at the Old Truro Cemetery, identified as the last remains of Susan Perry. The first body, Susan Perry, was discovered on February 8 when police were looking for the bodies of 2 other women, Patricia Walsh, and Mary Ann Wysocki. Perry had disappeared the previous Labor Day. Her body, which had been cut into 8 pieces, was considerably decomposed. On March 4, the dismembered bodies of Walsh, Wysocki, and Sidney Monzon were found buried together a mile and a half from the first grave site. Walsh and Wysocki had both been shot in the head, with hearts removed from all 3 victims. The remains bore human teeth marks, and the coroner discovered evidence of necrophilia. Underneath them was the dismembered, decomposed corpse of Sidney Monzon. Investigators learned that Walsh and Wysocki had met Antonecosta in Provincetown. Found in possession of their car, Costa produced a suspicious bill of sale, claiming he purchased the vehicle before the women, quote-unquote, left for Canada. On March 6, 1969, he was arrested on suspicion of murder after detectives learned that the burial site was Costa's private garden, used for stashing drugs and growing marijuana. In custody, the suspect changed his story several times, twice implicating innocent friends in the murders, repeatedly failing polygraph examinations. His first psychiatric exam on March 31 resulted in the diagnosis of a schizoid personality. 3 months later, a secondary psychiatrist characterized Costa as a modern-day Marquis de Sade and a sexually dangerous man capable of murder. What had led authorities to the woods in the first place had been the discovery of an abandoned Volkswagen van that belonged to Walsh. Not far from the van, police found a torn cover of a Volkswagen van owner manual. Police laboratory tests identified Costa's fingerprints on the cover. While the discovery of the bodies caused a sensation, it was apparently the district attorney Edmund Dennis who turned the case into a media firestorm. The hearts of each girl had been removed from the bodies and were not in the graves, nor were they found. Denise announced at a press conference, quote-unquote, a razor-like device was found near the graves. Each body was cut into as many parts as there are joints. Denise also said that teeth marks had been found on the bodies. When a reporter asked if this was the work of a Cape Cod vampire, Denise nodded. And with that, the media furor had suddenly been whipped into a frenzy. While Dennis's comments made for great copy, they were all completely untrue. The hearts had not been removed, although some organs were missing from at least one of the bodies. No cutting device had been found, and the remark about as many body parts as joints was wild hyperbole, if not physically impossible. The floodgates opened on July 12, 1969, when Costa finally confessed to the murder of Mary Wysocki. Costa's trial opened on May 6, 1970, ending with his conviction on 4 counts of murder. Sentenced to life imprisonment on May 29, he began stocking his cell with books on ritual magic and the occult, including a copy of Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible. Antonecosta's garden had become a tourist trap, something that reportedly continues to this day. Curiosity seekers flocked to the Truro woods hoping to find the grave, or worse, one of the victim's joints that had been overlooked by police. Rumors of satanic worship, which persists to this day, began to shroud the case. Costa was tried and convicted of 2 of the murders in May 1970. His lawyer attempted to paint him as psychotic, but Costa would have none of that. At the conclusion of his trial, the alleged murderer gave a rational, intelligent speech to the jury that must have convinced them he was not only a killer, but also terribly sane. The judge sentenced him to spend the rest of his life at Walpole Prison. On Sunday, May 12, 1974, a Walpole corrections officer making a routine peer check at 8:10 p.m. discovered Antonecosta hanging by the neck from a woven leather belt knotted around the upper bars of his cell. Costa's eyes bulged open. His darkly mottled face was frozen into a grotesque mask. Blood foamed against his gaping lips from his having bitten his tongue nearly in half. One unlaced knicker had been kicked off during his death struggles, revealing a mended white sock. Costa had urinated down the front of his unpressed prison trousers. Medical examiner Harold L. Schenker certified that Antone Charles Costa had died of asphyxiation by hanging, suicide. Costa was 29 years old. Costa never confessed to the killings, unless you happen to subscribe to Daniel Webster's belief that suicide is confession. The closest he came to admitting his involvement in the deaths of the 4 women was in Resurrection, a factual novel about the killings that he wrote while in prison. According to Resurrection, Costa did not commit the murders. Responsibility for their deaths fell to Carl, a pseudonym that Costa used for a friend. Carl allegedly shot Mary Ann Wysocki and Patricia Walsh in the Truro woods. Susan Perry and Sidney Monzon supposedly died of drug overdoses, one in the woods and the other in Carl's apartment. Both were dismembered after their deaths, Costa claimed, and buried later. In the case of the latter 2 women, Costa's novel claimed he was not involved in their deaths other than the knowledge that they had happened. Costa is buried in Provincetown in an unmarked grave next to his mother. There are those today who remember him. Some believe he was innocent and that the real killer has never been captured. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twisted Mind and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat! Thank you for taking the time to comment, Anonymous Recounter, Eriza Miguel, Gracia and Everything TV, Tess Atienza, Miss Colette, Mickey Borja, Jasper Reed Stories, Lonnie Pablo 5, Adrian Leo Rico, Lucky Girl, Tiktilaok Stories, Pinoy Shocking Stories, Miss Colette, Pastor Jim, Unicorn Blood V2, Berental V Blogs, and Ma'am Aubrey Delgado. Also, thank you for taking the time to join me during the premieres to Tess Atienza, Eliseo Saavedra, Aubrey Delgado, Tales from the Creepinoy, Pastor Jim, Abigail Sophia, Greenworks Stories, Eriza Miguel, Disturbed Spirit, Miss Colette, Ben Jose, and Dark Hop PH. Maraming salamat po.